Let's say China.
China.
There are next-door neighbors, and you can actually see Russia from land here in Alaska.
You go over to China.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
Trump statement, tweeting out insults to Angela Merkel. What's he doing?
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your host.
Woo, yes, it's me, James Andrews, and you are listening to So This Happened, the only news you need, or, as Mrs. Andrews refers to it, the greatest excuse for me not to do my chores around the house. It is Friday. We made it. The 2nd of June, 2017. And today, the world is still up in arms about Donald Trump's decision to leave the Paris Climate Accord. And not just the world, but here in the US, people are at each other's necks over this. There are people who say Donald Trump did the right thing, he's a stud of a man. There are other people saying he's a dickhead. The people who think that Donald Trump did the right thing may not have the entire story, though, and if they listen to Donald Trump's statement yesterday, they're going to be confused. If they listen to a really sad Sean Spicer's press conference today, they're going to be even more confused. And if, before that, they listen to douchebag Scott Pruett's comments, they are going to be absolutely lost, because none of these men are making any sense whatsoever. In Donald Trump's almost 30-minute speech yesterday announcing that the US would be leaving the Paris Climate Accord, he essentially referenced things that just have nothing to do with the climate accord. He said it's bad for America, we need to renegotiate it and get a better deal for us. Donald, we understand that you are running, or you ran rather, and now you're trying to push this America First objective. But the problem is, no one else in the world wants to renegotiate the treaty. And you can't just go to them and say, yeah, this is shit for us, so let's make it better for us and maybe worse for you. And this idea is held over even more. Scott Pruett said today in the press conference that the only reason Europe was excited that the US had joined the Paris Treaty was because they knew it would economically harm the US, and they were sad that the US was leaving because they knew that that would make the US stronger economically. And if that isn't the most paranoid craziness I have ever heard, I don't know what is. Now, there has been a question. Does Donald Trump have any idea what the Paris Climate Accord even is? Some of his wording yesterday in his speech would suggest not, when he said, I was elected to represent the citizens of Pittsburgh, not Paris. Donald, the Paris Climate Accord actually has nothing to do with Paris. You know that, right? It's just because it was in Paris when it was signed. Yeah? So if it had been in Pittsburgh, it would have been called the Pittsburgh Climate Accord. The same for New York or even Mar-a-Lago, the Mar-a-Lago Climate Accord. So nothing to do with Paris, right? Just so we know that. And then there was a question, does Donald Trump believe in global warming? Does he still think it is a hoax? Because he said many times that climate change is just a big hoax. Does he still think that? Well, nobody could get any answers out of the White House today. Have a listen to this.
Just hoping you can clear this up once and for all. Yes or no? Does the president believe that climate change is real and a threat to the United States?
You know what's interesting about all the discussions we had through the last several weeks have been focused on one singular issue. Is Paris good or not for this country? That's the discussions I've had with the president. So that's been my focus. The focus remained on whether Paris put us at a disadvantage, and in fact, it did. It put us at an economic disadvantage. You may not know this, but Paris, it set targets of 26 to 28%. With the entire agenda of the previous administration, we still fell 40% short of those targets. It was a failed deal to begin with. And even if all of the targets were met by all nations across the globe, it only reduced the temperature by less than 2/1 degree. So that is something that the president focused upon with respect to how it impacted us economically and whether there were good environmental objectives that were achieved as a result of Paris. His decision was no, and that was the extent of our discussions. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so that's Scott Pruett completely and utterly changing the topic. The lady asked him, does Donald Trump still believe that climate change is a myth? And Scott Pruett said, well, let me tell you what Donald Trump and I have talked about. That is essentially saying, Scott, why is the sky blue? And then Scott saying, well, you know, the interesting thing about the grass is it's green and it grows when you add water to it. Things grow in it. Flowers sometimes weeds, and bugs. Little bugs, fire ants, they're a bastard to get rid of, but there is a powder that you can use. You pour it on there, and it kills the entire nest. It's fantastic. Next question, please. And they went on. They still tried to get an answer out of him, and it continues.
Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to go back to the first question that was asked that you didn't answer. Does the president believe today that climate change is a hoax? That's something, of course, he said in the campaign. When the pool was up in the Oval Office with him a couple days ago, he refused to answer. So I'm wondering if you can speak for him.
You know, I did answer the question because I said the discussions the president and I have had over the last several weeks have been focused on one key issue. Is Paris good or bad for this country?
Well, thanks, Scott. That clears it up completely. Now we know. Yeah. Does Donald Trump believe in climate change? No, wait, we don't know. Maybe Sean Spicer can answer that question.
Hey, Sean, you were asked earlier this week about the president's personal views on climate change and whether or not he believes it's a hoax. You said you hadn't had a chance to have that conversation with him. Now it's been 48, 72 hours. What does the president actually believe about climate change? Does he still believe it's a hoax? Could you clarify that, since apparently nobody else in the White House can?
Yeah, I have not had an opportunity to have that discussion.
The American people deserve to know what the president believes on such
I
an
think
important
that
issue.
Administrator Pruett pointed out that what the president is focused on is making sure that we have clean water, clean air, and making sure that we have the best deal for the American workers. Blake.
Okay, so no, Sean also cannot answer that question. So apparently nobody knows if Donald Trump still stands by his story that climate change is a hoax. And that's kind of important, I feel, because if we have a president who says climate change is a hoax when 99% of scientists agree that it is not a hoax, then surely this is not the man that should be deciding whether or not the US leaves a agreement that is designed to help global warming and climate change. You see, he just doesn't believe in it. It's like a priest who doesn't believe in God, which is actually probably more common than you would think, but it's fucked up. And one thing, just on a side note, Sean Spicer seems very sad. He's not his usual jovial self, and I want to cheer him up. So, Sean Spicer, this, my friend, is for you.
Sean Spicer, why so glum? It looks like you've lost all of your fun. Is it because the press thinks you're dumb? Or did Mike Pence stare too long at your bum? Sean Spicer, where is your smile? It's been gone now for quite a while. You look like you've run a country mile. Please say you're okay and show us your smile.
Yeah, you did not realise that you had a choir boy in your presence. Well, you're welcome, and I apologise, because that was probably really, really awful, but it was for Sean, so I hope that maybe brightened his day a little bit. And now I need to play a snippet from what Arnold Schwarzenegger said yesterday about Donald Trump pulling out of the climate accord. And this is probably just because I am a product of the 1980s and Arnold Schwarzenegger was awesome. Anyway, here's Arnie.
President Trump says he's pulling out of the Paris Climate Agreement. My message to you, Mr. President, is that as a public servant, and especially as a president, your first and most important responsibility is to protect the people. 200,000 people die every year in the US from air pollution, and that half of our rivers and streams are too polluted for our health. We can't sit back and just do nothing while people are getting sick and dying, especially when you know there is another way. So please, Mr. President, choose the future. You see, the people will rise up. Other leaders from local government will rise up and fill the void that you are creating. Like all the great movements in human history, our clean future starts with the grassroots movement in our communities, our cities, and our states. 70% of our dirty emissions can be controlled at the state and local level. Share this video if you think it's time to start a grassroots revolution to save our planet.
And I gotta be honest, Mr. President, I would not mess with him, because he will come back from the future and terminate your fucking arse. You gotta listen to him when he speaks, man. And then Macron made a statement in English, which is so cool, because Donald Trump making a statement in French would be fucking hilarious.
Today, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, announced his decision to withdraw the United States from the Paris Agreement. I do respect this decision, but I do think it is an actual mistake, both for the US and for our planet. I just said President Trump in a few words a few minutes ago this assessment. Tonight, I wish to tell the United States, France believes in you. The world believes in you. I know that you are a great nation. I know your history, our common history. To all scientists, engineers, entrepreneurs, responsible citizens who were disappointed by the decision of the President of the United States, I want to say that they will find in France a second homeland. I call on them, come and work here with us, to work together on concrete solutions for our climate, our environment. I can assure you, France will not give up the fight. I reaffirm clearly that the Paris Agreement remains irreversible and will be implemented not just by France, but by all the other nations. Over the coming hours, I will have the opportunity to speak with our main partners to define a common strategy and to launch new initiatives. I already know that I can count on them. I call on you to remain confident. We will succeed because we are fully committed. Because wherever we live, whoever we are, we all share the same responsibility. Make our planet great again. Thank you.
Wow. Wow. That is what a leader sounds like. Spectacular. And now we're almost out of time, but I just want to play a little snippet of Van Jones last night on CNN, because this was the best reaction to Trump pulling out of the climate accord. So here's Van. It's awesome.
I mean, there's so much wrong, so many wrong things. Okay, so just simple stuff. He says he's so proud that we reduced, under the Clean Air Act, our pollutants by 65%. That's a huge achievement. He's proud of it. But carbon was not counted as a pollutant under the Clean Air Act until halfway through the Obama term. So then Obama moves forward to try to now do what the Clean Air Act says to do, and they stop him, and they say that's terrible. So you're either for the Clean Air Act, which would then mean that, and by the way, your conservative Supreme Court agrees with this, that you have a responsibility to reduce the pollution, or you're against it. They talk against themselves all the time. They're for fracking, which is hurting coal, and they're for coal. And when you have this word salad of nonsense coming from an EPA administrator who didn't say one word about the environment. His job is to be the environmental protection person. There was no protection in that speech. This is part of why I think with normal people, you just saw Elon Musk pull out. You cannot deal with this White House because you cannot deal with facts, you cannot deal with science, you cannot deal with economics, you can't deal with jobs, you can't deal with anything but mythology and slogans.
So yeah, that was awesome. Couldn't have said it any better myself, which is why I didn't. I let Van Jones handle it for me. Anyway, we are absolutely out of time. Thank you so much for listening. You can always follow me on Twitter at SoThisHappen. And if you like what we're doing, please subscribe on the podcast wherever you're listening to it. And I will chat with you tomorrow. Goodbye. No, wait, I won't chat with you tomorrow. Shit, it's Friday. I'll chat with you Monday. Have an awesome weekend. I forgot. It's time for a drink. Bye.